Great. So you got the chance to review the questions that I was going to add, and please, it's an overall framework, but I always like to make sure that, you have the questions in advance so you sort of know the overall direction that I'm going to go in. And, but I don't think anything there was like, I hope, puzzling or weird. Maybe,
No.
pretty straightforward questions that I wanted to ask. And so I am really interested to hear about your experience of the Drexel Interiors program. And I am really interested because not a lot of our students have gone into the Interiors program at Drexel for a variety of reasons. And it's sort of chicken and egg. And because of that, I'm not as familiar with the program. So
excuse me, Michael, you should do name first.
Oh yeah, this is...
we know Emily.
We do know Emily. This is Emily Eichelberger, and a graduate of Community College's Interiors program and a graduate of Drexel's Interiors program, a freshly minted graduate, actually. So we're here to talk about Drexel's program, and particularly to talk about its strengths, why someone in interiors should consider it, and how well this has worked as far as preparing someone to go into the profession. So I'm so glad that Emily's agreed to do this, and I look forward to our conversation.
And Emily was our Excellence in Interior Design Award winner for her graduation year.
So,
Very nice.
Outstanding student.
Yes, you were an outstanding student. I remember you well.
Thank you.
That's great. So tell me, I mean, of all the schools, what made you choose Drexel's interior program? And did you look at other schools, or were you pretty much decided on Drexel?
So, I knew, well, going into CCP, I was not certain that I would be transferring. I was just kind of taking things as they came. And then as the momentum built, I figured it would be in my best interest to continue this. And I live in South Philadelphia and I intend to stay here. So just picking from the schools in the area, more college here on the Parkway was my #1 pick initially. I think their conceptual focus of study was appealing to me, and I kind of was getting all my ducks in a row for that, and then kind of made a curve towards Drexel because of their co-op situation. They're super reputable, a lot of really good connections in the city, and it's one of the few programs that's a Bachelor's of Science rather than a Bachelor's of Arts. Mm-hmm. So really technically focused and applicable. And I just wanted to know that I would leave with a degree and a really good chance to land a reliable job.
Excellent. Actually, maybe could you tell us a little bit more about that technical focus, since that seems to be something that really drew you?
So I know, I mean, there's a lot of focus on, like, for instance, construction and just like documentation and how things that you're actually going to do within an office setting. You're still going to get to like work on, really artistically driven conceptual ideas, but then you're kind of anchored down with the groundwork for just the ability to do those things technically and apply them to like a firm job. Mm-hmm. So if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah,
okay.
That there's an applicability to what you do right away, and that you're, really involved in the technical aspects. Although, I mean, reviewing the curriculum, there is still a lot of fine arts and art history that, is part of the curriculum. So it's not that it's all nuts and bolts, or you could...
Oh, yeah. If it were, I would be losing my mind. So there was a nice balance of those two things.
Mm-hmm.
So would you agree that that's one of the strengths, or certainly something that appealed to you in selecting that program? And what do you feel are maybe some of the other strengths of Drexel's program?
Well, I mean, the reputability, like you're leaving with a great set of skills, and that's, you know, kind of known across the field, I think. So as soon as you leave Drexel, I think a lot of firms are like looking to see who's coming out of that program and almost like just coming in and scooping up fresh graduates for work and things like that. The co-op situation again, you have the ability to really like network and get into like meeting all of the reps in the industry and like just building those connections, which is really valuable. They were just, the interiors program specifically was just, I think it was like Architectural Digest named them top 10, I want to say, in the nation for the interiors program. And just that there's a varied focus, like they don't put all their eggs into like the basket of one program, like you were only going to learn Revit, or, I mean, they have to narrow it down somewhat, but there's a wide range of skills that you're going to come out with.
Okay. I was also curious, so, you know, those are some of the definite strengths. I was also just curious with Drexel. I always love the physical layout. The urban center is pretty amazing. Did you see any advantage with sharing facilities and I believe courses with other creative programs such as architecture? I don't know if you shared actually with architecture, but with some other, you know, there was definitely, I think, some opportunities for cross-discipline work.
A little bit. Yeah, getting the tour of the urban center is really neat because it's this, as you know, the Venturi building, and it's very open and you get to see a lot of what's going on. You don't get to work a lot with architecture because they're working all day and then they have like their night classes. And there's some crossover with working with other disciplines, but for the most part, you're kind of like in your own, like we were in our interiors bubble, which was helpful in a way, but you still get like a glimpse of what's going on in other majors. So that was neat.
Okay.
Did you share facilities with them, like woodworking shops or anything?
Oh, yeah. So like you would take a wood shop and most of the people in that class would be interiors focused, but like, you know, there'll be some stragglers mixed in there too.
Okay.
But yeah, that kind of facility stuff, we would all share those too.
Mm-hmm.
And what are the facilities like? I mean, this is for the benefit of our students who, in our current situation, may or may not be able to have a tour. Could you maybe describe that a little bit?
Yeah. Where's the best way to? So for the urban center, which would be the Westfall School for all design majors, you have a makerspace with 3D printers and laser cutters. What else? We have, like, we share space with architecture, so we're doing all our model building in there. They just recently added like printing stations so that we're not running to FedEx all the time. And then there's a separate building that has full wood shops. We're doing welding. I took a furniture class, which I really loved. We had sculpture classes. We're making casts of things. So I really enjoyed working with all the different mediums, and we're not just glued to a computer all day long.
Did you have access to nice computer labs though, or did you need your own?
We had a computer lab, which most of us were dependent on. I was told that they're phasing those out and that other departments, you have to have your own laptop and you can like work from a virtual desktop. So I think that's how they're going to start doing things, especially after everyone's been dependent on their own devices for this last couple months. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's how they go back into things.
Good. So I was, yeah, that will be, you know, moving forward, you know, what people are going to be doing. I was just curious. Well, I guess I was trying to say or ask is, but you found like a lot of opportunities, it sounds like, to work in a lot of different mediums, learn a lot of different skills. Welding right?
Yeah.
Well, you can make furniture, you probably do need to know how to weld, but I enjoy welding. I've done it in a very small scale.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was cool. I ended up meeting a lot of people in the wood shop, and I went in there last winter break and made a bunch of Christmas gifts for people. Like I was very like into the hands-on aspect of things.
That's great. So there's a nice blend of the virtual and the real, the making that,
Hmm.
yeah, that does sound very appealing. Um, I wondered, well, I think the other thing, of course, that Drexel really stands out in is the co-op program. And you talked a little bit about it, but maybe you could expand on that a little bit more, because it's something that, you know, is very much a part of the Drexel experience and one of its big selling points. So perhaps you could just amplify a bit more on the co-op,
Yeah, sure.
what it is, and
So you take like a co-op 101 like preparatory class, and just like tells you basically how to put together your resume and your portfolio and go on an interview, and just getting ready for that experience. And then you basically just get to go through their system and see the connections that they already have, and set up interviews with local firms, not local firms. You can do independent searches if there's like somewhere that you really want to work, and you can seek them out and then set it up on your own. I got my co-op through the system, and I was pretty much open to anything really, because any experience is a new experience in that regard. Uh, so yeah, I was paired up with you and Cole. They do commercial, not much hospitality, a lot of healthcare, education, higher ed. So yeah, I was able to see how things work. Since it is like such a large firm, it was harder to see a whole project through like beginning to end. You get a lot of times it's looked upon as a negative experience to be working in the materials library. I don't see it that way, but you get to be in the library, seeing all the materials, and then also working on project work, meeting with reps, rep appointments, and also being put on tasks for projects. So it was pretty well-rounded for me anyway. Yeah.
I'm curious.
And
So what, oh, I'm sorry, David, you go ahead.
about the co-op, is it required for credit, and is it a semester or a year?
Oh, right. It is required. It is 6 months, so that would be your 2 quarters. You either have it like fall, winter, or spring, summer. I had the fall, winter co-op. You're working full time. All of the interiors co-ops were paid. I've heard that like other departments, like fashion, is harder to get a paid co-op, but all of our co-ops were paid. And I mean, I've been dependent on working and paying for my day to day, so you're able to swing it based on what you're getting paid.
Were you taking classes at the same time, or is just full time?
No, so it's just straight 9 to 5. I think some people were taking like one class while they were working just to like get it out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it's
Not
nice to.
required. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so you continued part-time after you completed the co-op? Is that,
Right.
that's great. And I'm just curious, Ewing Cole, for our students who may not be familiar with the firm, is a very large firm. We were discussing probably the biggest architecture firm in the Philadelphia area. So you're working typically on large projects, right? And I was just kind of curious, what kind of projects did you work on? And were there any that you particularly loved? And you know, kind of what you did.
So they're huge. Some of the projects that they have, like they've been working on this hospital in Duluth, Minnesota, that's like literally 1 million square feet. It's gigantic. And so like getting to see the large scale of that type of project, but also like getting into the minutia of like, I was looking up information for like the light reflectancy values of materials. So like you can get into something like really specific, but also see like the larger picture. They do a lot of like not so exciting commercial type spaces, but then they also have like all the Fillmore venues and like Irving Plaza in New York. So they get to like do some fun things too. And just the nature of the industry now, where like hospitality is being incorporated into just about everything. And there's like been a real push for that lately. So there's a lot of opportunity.
That's great. So, that's really nice. I mean, with the emphasis on the practicality in the program itself, and then the required co-op, you're helping to build the case about how well Drexel can prepare you to go into the profession. And I think, I'm just sort of doing that as like, maybe if I'm summarizing that correctly. I'm actually just kind of curious, you may not have the answer right now. Might you be interested in going eventually to a smaller firm? I've certainly experienced working in a very large architecture firm. It has its pluses and minuses, as does working in a small firm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Like, I would love to see, a different work environment, different types of work. Like, I think wherever I go next is going to be just to get a different feel for what's out there. I'd like to see a little more hospitality, maybe not residential, but and also just working with a smaller firm. Like I met with these two women who are Drexel graduates, and they started their own firm, APOP, and they have their office in the Bach building. So I met with them, and I mean, it was the complete opposite end of the spectrum. So like what their day-to-day looks like is completely different from what I would have at Ewing Cole. So it really, things can change based on where you are, for sure.
No, I can understand that. So I guess the other thing, now we're sort of a little bit, well, I'd like you to put on maybe a little bit of a critical hat towards your Drexel experience. I found that our students are really helpful in this. People who've graduated from our program have gone on to another program. So, we've talked about the strengths of the Drexel program. Are there areas where you think it could have been stronger?
Well, I will say if I would have gone straight into Drexel without any prior college experience, I may not have picked these things out, but having come from CCP and having the experience that I did, maybe if it's easier to like go under the radar if you really wanted to. Like it's almost, it applies for everywhere, but you're gonna get out of it what you put into it. And I think all you guys at the community college are really great in like nurturing and like picking out like strong suits in people and like kind of pushing those things, but it's easier to like not get those things noticed if you're just, I don't know if that makes sense.
Well,
the other thing was it's not quite as diverse of a program in a lot of ways. I really enjoyed my time at the community college because everyone was coming from all different places, points of their life, going into like a second career, or there was a lot of diversity in what people were expecting out of the program. And at Drexel, I'm sure it applies to a lot of other places too, but everyone is coming out of high school, they're at a certain age, they come from a very specific socioeconomic background. So there's not a lot of diversity. I took a lot of time off after high school, so I thought for sure I'd run into somebody who was in a similar scenario, and I did not. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I can appreciate that. And this folds really well into my next question, which was how well did community college prepare you for transfer?
I mean, it was great. I definitely could not have gotten myself through the Drexel program, I don't think, without that preparation. I was able to use a lot of my credits towards transfer, not directly, they don't have a direct transfer, but they were able to knock a couple things off, and then other things transferred as general electives. The portfolio, for instance, that we put together, I was able to use that for my transfer. I got a really nice scholarship just by having one. I got a lot of financial aid just based on the work that I had and the prior experience from the community college. So it was very, very helpful.
Were there, we hear from some schools that there's a lot of transfer students. Were there several other transfer students? And was the experience of making that transfer, I don't know, awkward, or did you feel welcome when you arrived? I mean, there's obviously a getting used to the new place, but soon enough were you, at home enough?
I was really curious to see how it would be going into it for a lot of reasons. And it was a little tricky because, yeah, everyone had kind of already established themselves. I arrived into their second year. So I basically just had the last 3 years of being there, like along the same trajectory that they'd already been on. So yeah, everyone was kind of like rooted, and I was kind of like hopping in there, which is fine. But everyone was really great, and I didn't feel like, it was a good ease in, I'd say.
But not too many other transfer students?
Not really. There was maybe one or two that had transferred, and then, like we lost a couple, like one or two that had gone somewhere else, but it was pretty consistent through the whole time I was there.
Yeah. Last year I heard, just as a side note, that Jefferson had 17 transfer students into their architecture department, and
Wow.
I think like nearly half of them came from our school. So there's just in recent years it seems just a huge influx going in that direction for architecture in particular, not interiors, but yeah, that's just a big piece of a program like that. So not the case for Drexel interiors, which yeah, it's not a better or worse thing, just something to note.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please, you go ahead.
The Jefferson program was also appealing to me. I'm sure if it were a little closer for me to get to, I would have maybe looked into it more. But there's just a lot of factors I was working with, and proximity plays a big role in that. So
Sure.
No, I can appreciate that. And so the big question, of course, I have, and this is one of the things that with Drexel, is tuition.
yes.
It's very expensive, relatively speaking. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how did you manage the tuition for 3 years, and what kind of support did you get as far as any kind of financial aid or grants? I mean, basically, how did you make that work?
Well, I was very aware of how expensive it was. It's comparable to more. So like when I was weighing out the two options, they were on the same level, and kind of was taking a leap of faith and hoping that it would work out. And I was very fortunate in that I did receive a lot of grants and scholarships based on my work that I had showed them, and just the fact that I already was like on this trajectory from the community college. I think that it was mm, it was like a safe bet almost, in
Mm.
that they were convinced I would finish the program, I would do well. I'd already, um, but yeah, so I had a really good Drexel scholarship, portfolio scholarship, and then other federal aid. So like I'd even gone to the financial aid office and they were like, "You've got a lot of aid from us somehow." And yeah, I really owe it to the experience that I had already.
Great. I mean, there's something that I would like to do, which is you talked about your work in your portfolio, is if you maybe could share some examples of your work. I know we just heard from Paula Behrens that you have some of your final work posted on Facebook,
Yeah.
but it would be great to be able to fold it in so that maybe our students could look at some of your work now as part of this video. And I also, I have a sort of generic question at the end is, do you have any advice for our students? I think you've kind of outlined it, but if you maybe could sum that up or
Yeah.
explain a bit.
So basically, I mean, I never anticipated this being my end game. I just kind of have been taking things as they come, and I think that's a really good piece of advice, is to not get overwhelmed by the bigger picture and just take advantage of these small opportunities when they present themselves. Um, the city is very small and everyone knows everyone, so don't burn any bridges. um, keep connections. The most valuable connections that you have are not going to be some person that gave you their card at a mixer, but a genuine um, a genuine relationship that you make with a rep or someone from the architecture team, or like, you never know when these things are going to pop up, and they're good things to have in your back pocket. And yeah, don't sell yourself short.
Mhm. Good.
Great. Other than wanting to have a chance to see some of your work, I was just curious. Would it be possible for our students to contact you?
Yeah, of course.
Great.
Absolutely.
We have your email.
Yeah. um,
Yeah.
I think when I was preparing to transfer, it would have been really helpful if there were more people that had already gone through this, or didn't seem to be too many people that had like the experience to talk about. So I'm absolutely available for that info.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a side note that as I've been doing this portfolio class for a while, that our graduates, students like you, are the most valuable resources we have. That you can really tell us about the program, about your decision making, about your experience, and you can do it in a way that is very clear and focused. I mean, I think you've done a great job of explaining, your decision making and your experience. So I don't know if David, do you have any questions?
A question about the workload, studio workload, course workload, and did you work at the same time to help make ends meet? And is that, I mean, how many hours could you work, get a part-time job? Is it possible to do both at once, or?
For me, it wasn't an option not to do that. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
sure I could have taken out a ton of loans, but I mean, in the time that I've been at Drexel, I've organized and planned my own wedding. I bought a house. I've been working in a restaurant on the weekends at the same time that I was working co-op part-time. And in hindsight, it sounds insane, but like when there's something that you want to do, you just find the time to do it. And I
Mhm.
always make sure I have a full night's sleep. I would refuse to pull all-nighters. Uh, so yeah, it's doable.
And so the Drexel workload, I mean, it allowed for that, and it allowed for you to do well there.
Yeah, it's the workload is definitely intense, but I don't know. Somehow there's enough hours in the day.
Okay.
So I guess I could share my screen possibly. I have some
That would
photos.
be excellent.
Cool. Let's see here.
Does Emily have to be made a co-host or?
Oh, you know what? Yeah, I don't think.
I will do that.
Okay.
How did you feel about the quality of the work coming out of the studios there? When you arrived, were you on par with your peers there, or?
I didn't feel as if I was going into it. I like went in feeling really strong. I like left the community college program like a really high level of work in my eyes. And I see it as a plus because everyone that was in there had like such a strong work ethic and was putting out some really great work, and it allowed me to try and keep up to that level. Otherwise, it's easy to coast when you feel like you've met an expectation. So yeah, the work coming out of there is really good, and I think I just benefited from it.
Mm-hmm. But you weren't overly intimidated or alarmed
No,
that you weren't ready. You didn't feel like you were not in the right place.
no, not at all. And seeing like since I went into their second year, it was almost like there were skills that I had that they hadn't gotten to yet.
I would imagine.
So that was helpful in the transition too.
Good.
So it's not letting me share my screen.
I've made you a co-host. Let me see.
Oh wait, okay. I think we got it. Are you able to see?
Yes, we see the screen, the PowerPoint.
There we go. Now we can
Okay.
see the whole thing.
Okay.
Great.
So I just grabbed a couple projects from my time at the community college as like an overview. So I'm sure some of these might look familiar. This was the solar sanctuary. I forget the actual name that we were using, but from Studio 4, a lot of hand rendering. And then this was the final project from Studio 4. The Sacred Space at the Thaddeus Stevens building, I'm pretty sure, which focused a lot on the solar study and background research and site analysis and things like that. And this is from Color and Lighting, my cafe, with SketchUp.
Did you continue using all the same programs at Drexel?
Yeah, I was thinking about taking the Revit class before I transferred because that would have been helpful, but I was able to, because they hadn't learned it yet, so I just kind of jumped in with them. So yeah, you used CAD, SketchUp, mostly Revit is what you're going to be working with over there. This was my commercial studio, which I chose to show because it really dug into a lot of the technical aspects. You start from a blank slate in a commercial building, and you come up with your brand and your concepts and do a ton of background studies and egress and blocking and bubble diagrams and just a ton of research to get into your final design. So I thought it was a really good overall project.
And that's Revit and Photoshop?
Yeah, and the other thing that's cool is you're not required to use one type of rendering style. So like you can kind of find your strong suit and like go with that, and that's almost like your visual identity. Some people will have really flashy Revit renders, which isn't really my style. I would mostly use Photoshop. So these are those renders.
That's actually Revit, those three-dimensional views? Or is that?
The line work is.
Okay.
So I would just export the line work from Revit. Oh boy.
Mhm.
Yep. This is our hospitality studio, where we planned out. There was a component we had to do a kind of like a maquette model doing 3D printing and laser cutting. So I used this little module of my seating system and screens. Then we had to do like technical drawings of like a cross section of our bar. So you're really understanding how things are going to be put together, which was kind of cool to do.
Mhm.
You know, you're making furniture selections, you're doing the whole deal.
I'm sorry, what can you just tell me about that model again? That's really intriguing. The one in the middle there. So that's a physical model?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so depending on what you thought would be most beneficial to show, it was required to have it either 3D printed or laser cut. And I had these little like banquette seating systems through the middle. And these were like the columns.
Mm.
So yeah, so that's 3D printed, and then the little laser cut screens just to show how that would work three-dimensionally.
Nice.
So this was in Revit, an axonometric, and then again, I just exported line work from Revit and then did Photoshop renders. And then this is from my senior thesis. For thesis, it's broken into 3 quarters. The first quarter is just research. You're doing background research, analysis. You're not even looking at like a site yet. You're just thinking about what you want to do and then just getting all your background information on it, as far as what you need, like capacities and what types of spaces you'll need, how much space you're going to need for them. Mine is a music venue slash bar lounge, kind of like nightclub vibe. And I use the Pico Power Station, which is located on the Delaware River, kind of by Fishtown, by the casinos down there.
Yes.
It's a very large industrial, essentially abandoned space. So I thought it'd be really cool to incorporate that. These are my floor plans. The first floor is all just lounge seating. There's a large kind of like focal point bar, specialty bar, and then has these really large, beautiful windows that I showcase with like a featured stair. You have to worry about egress and making sure there's enough egress for the amount of people in there. You really dig in deep. And so then the latter 2 quarters are just spent on design work. And the last quarter goes by so quickly. You're just kind of like wrapping up loose ends, getting your book together. Yeah, it really goes by in a flash.
Can you tell us a little bit about that quarter system? So that's 4 10-week quarters, and you go to school all 4 quarters.
Right. So they're 10-week quarters. You between summer and fall and winter, they're like a slightly larger break where you get 2 weeks. Otherwise, it's like 1 week of downtime and then you get right back in, which is kind of nice because you never lose that momentum.
Mm-hmm.
But it is intense, and 10 weeks go by really quickly.
Yeah.
And then these are my views. Well, some of them.
Yeah, very nice.
Beautiful.
With a lot of work.
I'm very impressed with your Photoshop technique.
Mm-hmm.
You also, what you've achieved is you have a graphic voice, which is what you were looking at. That's distinctive, but it's also a powerful use of technique.
Yeah, a lot of people I mean, some people's strong suit is these beautiful hand renders, like a minimal sketch design. Like it's all about what gets your point across the clearest, and not so much showing like your ability to work with Revit or even your like ability to work with Photoshop. It's all like what's going to be the most impactful to tell the story that you're trying to tell. So, and then I thought I would just add,
Oh, okay, the course sequence.
so these were the courses, like I met with someone one-on-one and they basically just went down the list of classes that I'd taken and were like, okay, you won't have to take this once you get here. And not all of these directly transferred. That's the only thing with Drexel, is that it's not such a clear-cut switchover.
Mhm.
I wasn't anticipating having to take an extra year, but it worked out.
And just to note, because of that quarter system, your earned hours at 68, that's not a direct transfer.
Right.
So I think Drexel takes 2/3 of each of our credits because you're on 10 weeks. We're on 15 weeks. So there's a translation there that's a little confusing. So don't, just for students considering this, the 68 is not our 68. So how many credits do you finish in a year? Like 200 or something crazy
178, I want to say.
in a year. But I mean, yeah, for your whole program.
Oh, right.
Yeah, like a typical bachelor's is 120 something credits, and yours is closer to 200, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the translation is a little confusing. So people have to be aware of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So there is like, it took me an extra year to graduate, but also 6 months of that I was on co-op. And yeah, it makes sense. It doesn't feel like I was cheated in any way. It just like adds up differently.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's basically all I had to show.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was really excellent. Very clear, and as I mentioned, a great help for me. As you've said, Drexel is not the most typical transfer school for a lot of reasons, but with your really positive experience, we hope that it will be in the future, or at least that more people will consider it.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. I mean, I definitely am pleased with my decision. I got a lot out of it, and I feel like the opportunities that I have now are not limited in any way. So I can pretty much go in any direction that I care to pursue. That's how I feel.
You were happy with the professors, the instructors, the high quality there?
Yeah. Everyone there is great. And I mean, again, like there's so much, there's a range of experience in the professors there. So if there's a certain area that you care to go to, there's someone that you can talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We often hear when students transfer, and it goes back to the point that you mentioned, that we're at CCP, it's a very kind of close-knit family, and yes, we're very nurturing. We kind of, it becomes a little family, and then when students go into the universities, it's often not that. It's kind of jarring, and they often have a lot of part-time instructors who run in, run out, and it's just a different. That's not a criticism necessarily. It's just a different culture, a different feel, and a lot of our students often say that it takes some getting used to. But you didn't struggle with that?
I mean, I definitely agree with everything you just said, and it's just a matter of, I mean, it's a point worth making.
Mm-hmm.
And it is what it is. People are definitely available. You just have to make sure you go out and seek out what it is you need.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of grad students that are there to assist all the time. So like they're putting out an insane amount of work, and they're always available to help. But yeah, it's a different feel, but if there's something you need, it can be made available.
Yeah, you can't be shy about it, really.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Great.
Mhm.
Awesome. Oh,
Oh,
you-
good. Yeah.
this is a portion of my grants and scholarships that were, I mean, I can't imagine that this would have been offered if I hadn't showed up with work to show. And I
Mm.
don't know how typical this is, but I mean, my portfolio scholarship, I don't even think that speaks to the quality of it because truthfully, I don't think it was very good. But
Don't say that.
so yeah, this I wouldn't have been able to make it work, I don't think, without the assistance. It's out there.
Mhm.
So it's reassuring.
Great. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you very much.
It was really great talking to you guys. Thanks
Oh,
for
yeah, it's great to see you
yeah,
and catch
likewise.
up.
And please give my information to anyone who has any questions at all.
No,
Yeah.
I think it's really, it's exciting for me because, you know, that we have within Philadelphia so many different alternatives. It can be a little confusing. I mean, you described, you know, how you came to your decision, but it can be a little bit of a challenge. And that's why I really like the way you talked us through the process and your experience. I think this is going to be very helpful for our students, particularly this fall. Not just learning about Drexel, but I mean, thinking about transfer overall. So,
Yeah.
oh.